Welcome to this video from On Civics, which is the first in our series called Tax Dollars, which is about what you get for them, and economics, and how that relates to your civic duties and responsibilities. Sadly, this episode is about an emergency. Now, would it be an emergency in your life if you were almost out of money in your bank account, and you had a couple of bills due in 2 days' time, and you won't get paid for at least a week? I mean, basically you owe more money than you can pay, and you're about to bounce a check or be late on a payment or something. Is that an emergency? Would you consider asking your family and friends to maybe borrow some money and spot you for a week? Now, what if it happened to the strongest financial entity in the entire world, and it inspired or caused global anxiety around the financial community and a little bit of panic, and caused a rise in interest rates that everybody has to pay around the entire world, and made the U.S. national debt harder to pay off? Is that an emergency? Well, by June or July, the U.S. Treasury Secretary says that a trigger event is going to happen. No entity on earth has ever borrowed more money than Uncle Sam. So normally, Uncle Sam would just say borrow some more money and pay his debts this June or July, and probably kick the can about the total debt discussion down the road. I mean, isn't that what Congress and the President normally do? Except, in this case, there's a law that prevents Uncle Sam from borrowing beyond a certain limit, and Uncle Sam is already at that debt limit. Now, mark my words, in this mess, eventually Congress will act, because it has to restore confidence, and then it'll send the bill to Biden, and he'll sign it. It will happen. The questions are, when, who will be impacted, and how much will it cost? Now, if the government just waits to come close to the deadline, like it did in 2011, the global financial markets will get skittish. Below is a link to an interview with Jamie Dimon, a Wall Street CEO, who totally agrees. The skittishness will be a combination of perception and psychology. Perhaps it is best explained by the fact that the U.S. Treasury debt is considered a benchmark lowest risk investment in the whole world. See some links below. Quick questions. How many times has Uncle Sam ever been late with his debt payments? How about never? Maybe square that, maybe add 0 and multiply by 0? 0, never. The markets say U.S. Treasuries are safe because the U.S. is so disciplined about paying its debts on time. It has the largest and most productive economy in the world, uses the strongest and most preferred currency, and there is tons of demand to buy U.S. Treasury securities. That means that Uncle Sam can borrow money at the snap of his fingers. Again, except there's a current law called the debt ceiling, and the debt ceiling means he can't borrow past a certain limit, and he's at that limit, which means Uncle Sam can't borrow anymore. When the markets suddenly realize, hey, Uncle Sam is close to bouncing a check for the first time ever, then the perception across the world changes from the world's safest investment to one with a higher risk profile. And when that happens, there's going to be a global financial earthquake. Maybe small, maybe big. That entirely depends on the perceptions of the financial markets. In 2011, a similar event prompted the Standard & Poor's organization to downgrade Uncle Sam's credit rating from AAA to AA+. That was very messy. Google it. That mess in 2011 is what happens if he just flirts with not paying his debts on time. That bill got passed on the day it was needed with not too many hours to spare. What happens if he actually misses a payment though? Well, for one, the world's only perfect credit rating is shot. Yes, Uncle Sam has perfect credit, and once he fails to make a payment on time, the USA will never get that back. Never. If he loses that perfect credit history, generally speaking, interest rates across the globe will rise. Today, nobody in the world borrows money cheaper than Uncle Sam. Sam's costs will go up, but Sam will still be the strongest borrower, so the rates for everyone else in the world will go up too. This is a FAFO thing. The first F is for the word futz, which is an informal word for messing around. On this, nobody has ever futzed around to find out. Is this sounding bad? Just like a classic infomercial, we have a, but wait, there's more! When you or I miss a payment, our interest rates rise. Yes, there will be a second and additional rise in the interest rate that Uncle Sam pays on his debts. The first, because the markets get nervous. The second, the extra increase, is because lending to him now has a non-zero risk. His past payment history was perfect, but no longer. Again, this is a FAFO thing. Assume the interest rate on the national debt goes up by a combination of 1% on both of those factors at future borrowing events. An additional 1% interest on $31 trillion of existing debt is about half of what gets deducted from your paycheck for Medicare and Social Security the entire year. Almost half. Or, how about this? Wikipedia lists the cost of a Gerald R. Ford class aircraft carrier for the U.S. military at $13 billion. A 1% rise on the interest rate that Uncle Sam pays on his debts would cost as much as 24 extra unneeded, useless, sit-in-mothballs aircraft carriers. That's how much extra every year you and I will pay if our interest rate that Uncle Sam has to pay on his debt rises by just 1%. 2 unused aircraft carriers every month. Yeah, FAFO, because we won't know if it will be 1% or more or less until people futz around. Also, this may affect the strength of the US dollar and diminish the dollar as the globally preferred international currency. If that changes, we'll have profound and catastrophic effects on you and I and all future Americans. And that's terrible. It's unlikely and it's remote, but again, FAFO. This is a perception confidence thing. Does that sound bad? Really bad? Catastrophically bad? Now here's the frustrating part. Eventually, this problem will be solved by Congress passing a bill raising the borrowing limit, and then Uncle Sam will go back to borrowing. Now, your first thought is, wait. Why doesn't Uncle Sam just address this in the budget? Why doesn't he just balance the budget? And my perfect answer for you is the budget affects October 1st of 2023, not now. The emergency's in June, July, and the budget would be October. And then your second question is, but wait, can't the Treasury just move money around and buy time? And the answer is yes. Congress was notified by the Treasury Secretary back on January 19th, 2023 that, quote, extraordinary measures were being taken to buy time and that the government will run out of money by June or July, give or take. Google it. So again, the simplest path is a bill through both houses of Congress that the president pushes into law that raises or removes the debt ceiling and that Uncle Sam borrows more money and pays his debts. We can discuss it further why, but take my word for it for now. That's eventually how this is going to be settled. The questions again, will it be well in advance so there's no crisis? Or will it be just before so there's a small crisis with only smallish penalties like 2011? Or will it be after there's an actual crisis in which we all live through a FAFO moment? Sarcastically, I ask, this is fun having your life subjected to this kind of drama. But here's the thing, you're not just a passenger. You have agency, just like Kevin McCarthy does. You can make a choice to forward this video to people who live in the USA and ask them to tell their congresspeople 2 things. Please pass future budgets that pay down the debt a little bit each year. Never, ever, and I mean not ever, miss any obligated or contractual debt payments. Not now, not ever, even if that means raising the debt slightly. I mean, yeah, it feels like we're shouting during a hurricane, but this is serious. I wish I were joking. I'm producing this in early April in hopes people are acting and forwarding this video and sharing it. What's the message? Pay down the debt. Absolutely, but never miss a payment. Never, never, never miss a payment. Now, why hasn't Washington already done that? Here we dive into politics. The basic reason is that the angry people have been put in charge of the U.S. House of Representatives and have convinced the Speaker of the House to essentially sell his soul to them in exchange for being elected Speaker of the House. Let's just say they control him, or he's allowed himself to be characterized as someone who has given up his personal agency, or he still has agency and he might surprise the world, but generally he's behaving like a sheep right now. If the Speaker of the House just blocks a bill from coming to the House floor for a vote, it can never pass the House. In so doing, he has the power to stop all new laws in Washington. I mean, the Senate is currently lined up to pass a clean debt limit bill. The President is ready to sign such a bill. The House is the lone holdout. And in so doing, he is holding a hostage, the perfect credit rating of the U.S. government, and also other FAFO things, like possibly provoking a worldwide recession. Now, in every movie where there's a villain who goes, who takes a hostage, he always wants something as a ransom. And what does Kevin McCarthy want as a ransom? I actually don't think he wants to do this. Let's see the Angry Caucus. Now, what does the Angry Caucus want as a ransom? Well, there's a link below of their offer to negotiate to pass a clean debt fix bill in exchange for undoing several laws that are already on the books in the past. Well, except for the fact that that wouldn't actually be clean because it would come with strings attached. And it conflates two things. It conflates the emergency we have right now and the longer term discussions for the future debt negotiations, or just eliminating entire past bills. A great question is this: how did all of our debt get here? And if we can say who's to blame, to whom should it be attributed? Now, generally, it can be said that Republicans don't like to raise taxes, and Democrats don't like to cut government. Okay, but to pay down the debt, both of them are likely, or both would help. I hope everyone wants to pay down the debt. I do. And there are two rules for doing it. The first one is to have more income than expenses, and then with the extra money, actually pay off the debt and not get new debt, and just be disciplined and say no. The other way, see rule number 1. Now, generally, Democrats are party of government, and Republicans are party of no debt. But if you look at these things over the last 23 years, that stereotype doesn't hold. There's a lot of Republican overspending when there were Republican presidents. And the mantra of we can't spend that now, the debt matters, happens from Republicans when the president is a Democrat. I mean, look at these 11 things. It turns out that it is not simple to come up with precise numbers or even like ballpark numbers for each of these, but we're working on it. But as a voter, we have a sense of the value and the purpose of each one of them. Go see who controlled which House of Congress and who was the president for each one of these things. These 11 unusual things, plus the possible growth in annual normal expenses like Social Security, medical expenses, and the military, are what has driven up the debt in the last 23 years. Now, the last 23 years are very, very important because in that time frame, from 1999 to 2022, we tripled the total amount of debt. Yeah, maybe you should pause this video on these two slides, because this right here basically says in the last 23 years, we had a double of what the debt was in 1999 to the existing debt. And the result was it tripled all the way up to $30.4 trillion. Effectively, for 23 years, we overspent by an average of 1.3 trillion excess spending every year. When you look at these 11 things, plus the 3 things that are a big part of every year's budget, is this a Democrat problem, a Republican problem, or an American problem? Again, economists struggle to come up with simple quantifications of these things. But it is not clear to me why a Democratic Senate and a Democratic President should buckle and fold just because angry members of the House took a government's credit rating hostage and put a gun to its head and said, okay, Democrats, make my day. This kind of tactic, where the government is taken hostage by, say, the Democratic Party, would never work because it goes against their basic ideals. I mean, in the stereotype, they're the party of making government work. And in fact, I have this principle that I teach called the axiom of asymmetry. And the axiom of asymmetry says that because of the fundamental differences in the way the two main political factions think and organize themselves and believe, a tactic that does work for one of them would actually probably be a very terrible idea for the other one to try to implement. Except the tactic of shutting down the government, or like in 2011 and now actually risking a debt crisis, hasn't worked out well for Republicans either. Most voters generally see it as obstructionist and trying to be a member of the government that shuts down the government, and that's a bad look. Kevin McCarthy knows this. Mitch McConnell knows this. John Boehner and Paul Ryan know this. Now, does it matter if the Angry Caucus knows this? No, it doesn't, because they're irrational. Remember, they're angry. Oh, there are rational Republicans that don't want to approach it this way. They'd be happy if magic happened, but otherwise they understand that in general this is an unwise risk-reward approach. I mean, look at this debt growth chart again, and then review this list again. This paints a jump ball picture, and if every voter understood this well, the Angry Caucus would be wise to stop bluffing with a bad poker hand. Of course, not every voter spends the time you're spending to learn about this. But folding a hand like this is exactly what McConnell, Boehner, and Paul Ryan eventually did after making a brief sad face for the cameras. And I'm okay with folding with dignity, but please don't draw it out. And again, those leaders proved themselves reasonable. And also, they didn't sell their soul to the Angry Caucus. Now, what's the Angry Caucus going to do? I don't know. FAFO. Do you want to futz around and find out? I don't. So will this get resolved sooner or later? If the Angry Caucus does nothing, then there's only one person in this whole mess that can do something. And it's the guy whose title says Speaker of the House, aka Kevin McCarthy. Remember, he does have agency. I don't know the mechanics of the House parliamentary rules, but here's the thing. A clean bill would pass with reasonable Republicans and then the votes of the Democratic members in the House. And this would happen if only they would work together. At that point, this whole video would just be an asterisk, nothing, a waste. I mean, really, this whole video would be irrelevant. Problem solved. But don't ask the Republicans to do that because, I guess, Democrats have cooties or something, even when the nation's financial health is at risk. Of course, let's not forget that if Kevin McCarthy does pull off a deal like that, where he works with Democrats, or even the world thinks he's working with Democrats, that might be his very, very last day as Speaker of the House. Because, see, the Angry Caucus, not rational. But, most of us would rather lose our job as Speaker of the House than keep it and go down in history as the person who ruined perfect credit and did terrible things for American families and workers and actually, flirted with a global recession and a bunch of other things like that. Now, Kevin McCarthy is about to become, or is already, the loneliest man in the world. But of course, there were 15 votes for the full House to finally elect him as Speaker because, again, with that thing, they weren't willing to do any compromises and wanted to elect the Speaker with only Republican votes. And so it took 15 votes from January 2nd to January 7th. And he was kind of lonely and somewhat embarrassed in that time too. So now, do John Boehner and Paul Ryan know his pain? Yes. Yes, they do. If there was a compromise person elected as Speaker of the House, say Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger, would this be a done deal? Yes. Yes, it would. After publishing this video, my highest priority will be to respond to questions and feedback on the existing debt ceiling videos, and as needed, follow-up videos that make those answers easy to understand and to forward. I mean, I would love to hear feedback what Jamie Dimon has to say about my video. That would be freaking cool. But in general, I'll bet he'd agree with my message, even if only privately, to say yes, Congress, pay down the debt in October budget, but for now, just don't miss any debt payments. Period. I have to take a moment to defend Kevin McCarthy, by the way. If I were him, I wouldn't take action against the Angry Caucus unless I knew the actions would work. Can the Democrats deliver the votes? Is the parliamentary process a lock? Can the Angry Caucus block his efforts somehow? For that reason, he may not be acting like a sheep. He may be working on contingency plans, lining up ducks in a row, maybe making a deal with Democrats, or whatever. I don't know. Once he works with Democrats, he will have burned a bridge with the Angry Caucus. But he will truly become an American leader. Of course, if he does nothing whatsoever, he is probably the stupidest or most self-interested political leader in the entire history of the U.S. Constitution. All right, time to close. This is a presentation of OnCivics.com. This is the first episode in our tax dollar series. One of the things you probably learned in this video was what your future tax dollars bought over the last 23 years of ballooning debt. Yes, I say that ironically. But if you want the debt to be even more expensive, just be quiet and do nothing. At On Civics, we talk about the privileges and responsibilities of citizenship. After all, that's what civics is. Our mission is to be the best organization in the history of the world at increasing civic virtue, civic education, and civic engagement. Your privilege and responsibility will be to pay down the debt. Why? Well, this is straight up serious, so that we can have a buffer for the next real emergency that comes along. Don't forget that when real global emergencies hit, what do? We borrow, and we borrow cheaper than anyone else in the world. And if the government is run professionally, and it can and will borrow cheaper than anyone else, than any other entity in the existence of the whole world, truly. Nevertheless, I'm personally scared of not paying down the debt before the next true emergency. And I'm also very scared that idiots might be in office when the next true emergency hits. Speaking of civic engagements, call all 3 of your congresspeople if you don't want this to blow up. This has been Jose Torres for OnCivics.com and part of our series On Your Tax. I want you to remember that I bear love in my heart for every single human being on earth. And I ask you to smile at everyone, including Kevin McCarthy, or especially Kevin McCarthy, just like our great character Wendy here. All right, adios.